Well, hello everybody. My name's Adam White, and I am Government Legislative Affairs advocate here for the Alaska Airmen's Association, and this is our second live event talking about advocacy efforts here in the great state of Alaska. So a little bit of a different time frame than this was last month, trying to still dial in when the most folks will be able to see this live and we can interact and go back and forth with some questions and answers. Tonight, I wanted to talk about a couple of services that have gone away here in Alaska, and they've kind of gone the way of the VHS tape. Some of you may not even know what that is, but maybe the better phrase to use is gone the way of the DVD. How about that? First, just want to say hello to everybody out there. It's good to see some folks joining in, and it's good to have you. So it is kind of cold here in Alaska. Winter has set in. I'm actually in Anchorage right now at our headquarters here on Lake Hood. It's been a beautiful afternoon here. As you can see behind me, it's dark now, but temperatures are hovering around the 0 mark, supposed to get down to 10, 15 degrees below 0 in some areas here in the Anchorage area. But when I left home this morning, it was 38 degrees below 0 at my house in Nenana. So it was nice to come south to enjoy this 0-degree weather today. So, but definitely winter is here. So what I wanted to talk about this time around is TIBS and TWEB. And so we can use a lot of acronyms in aviation, but those two services have been around for quite some time here in Alaska. And it's a method that had been used to get weather information to the pilot. One was over the telephone information service that was able to get that information to folks as they would call and get a pre-flight briefing. They could push a number on the menu and be able to listen to a route briefing that way. The other system that has now been shut down here in Alaska is TWEB. That's the transcribed weather information broadcaster here that would be broadcast over VORs and over NDBs in some areas. Both of those services have been shut down effectively January 1. It's comparable to what the lower 48 had as HIWAS, but a little bit different way that was delivered. So just a little bit of background and why those services have been discontinued. Anytime the FAA makes a decision to do something like that, they have a meeting about it. A lot of meetings. I spend a lot of my time interfacing with the government at different levels in meetings. This particular format is called a safety risk management panel to go through and look and see what could be impacted safety-wise if a particular decision were to be made. That happened back in July of this year, and myself with the Alaska Airmen's, Tom George with AOPA, several other folks from the Helicopter International Association, and a few other folks in the industry participated in that process with the FAA. It was a 2-day process, and sometimes they can be rather boring, but this one was a good series of meetings. Talked a lot about what the systems were, why we felt like that they may not be as effective as they used to be, what other programs might be available and methods of getting that information to the pilots as we fly around. What do we have today and why is this a problem? So a little bit more background. The telephone side of things, as you would call flight service, and you could listen to this pre-recorded briefing on a particular route. That's very easy to track as to how many people were actually using that service, because you know that you can go back in and see how many people called and when they called and how long they were on there. And so the FAA was able to track that information, and it was pretty sad actually to see the number of people who were calling the FAA, calling flight service to listen to those recorded briefings. And there weren't very many. Matter of fact, there were long stretches of time when no one outside of the FAA called those numbers. The FAA had their own quality control program to go back and verify the integrity of that information. And there were days when that was the only call that was received for that information. So So we do have good information that that service was no longer being used. And so I felt like, and the other folks from industry agreed with the FAA, that it was probably okay that that system go away. The other system that was being broadcast over VORs and some NDBs, it's a little more difficult to find out who actually used that. So we reached out to several of our members. Some of you responded back to me and told me what your opinion was of that, told me how you get your information as you fly around. I know how I get my information when I fly around. And I will tell you that I used that information being broadcast over the VORs. But did I have to use it? Was there other ways that I could get that information? One of the concerns that the FAA had is that it's getting more and more difficult to maintain that aging equipment. And so they weren't able to find parts for some of that system. The other concern that's becoming more and more of an issue these days was security. You think, man, what does security have to do with the weather recording? The FAA is concerned that somebody could have hacked into that system and recorded a nefarious weather forecast. And you think, man, what's the chances of that and what's the implications? Well, actually, it could be a pretty bad deal. If the weather forecast you were listening to was fake news, quote unquote, that's a term that we get thrown around a lot these days, but it was a very real possibility that the security side of that service was not going to be able to be maintained in a way that made it cost effective. Other things that are available for pilots today, we looked at the coverage of these radios, the VORs and the coverage of those versus the coverage of the RCOs, the remote communication outlets that Flight Service has, and being able to look and see if there was any gaps. Excuse me. And there were a couple of areas that slight differences in that coverage area, but the large majority of the state was not going to have a loss of coverage of being able to call on the radio and actually talk to a weather briefer at Flight Service to get that information. The other mitigation for that service was ADS-B. And we know that there's not complete coverage for the ADS-B ground stations here in the state, but that is the way that most people are now getting the information that they had been getting over TWEB. That was verified in some of the folks I talked to. It was verified by other people from industry that participated in that safety risk management panel. So at the end of those 2 days worth of meetings, it was determined that there were a couple of issues that we wanted to track and we wanted to watch, but at the end of the day, we felt that it wasn't going to introduce a new risk into the national airspace system. And so January 1, those two systems disappeared. So I'm kind of curious to know how many people even knew that those systems existed, first of all, and then use them and are going to miss them now that they're gone. I've heard from a couple of you that miss the TWEB portion, and I'll admit to you that I'm going to miss it from time to time because I enjoyed hearing that recording in my headset as I was listening through the current conditions in a few places in the area forecast for some areas around the state. But I can get that information other ways in other venues. So let me know if you have any serious operational issues when it comes to getting your weather as you're flying around as a result of those two systems being gone now. Again, with that, ADS-B has been talked about as a viable alternative. It's to use the entertainment metaphor that I started out with, VHS tape, old school delivery method for the video. DVDs, people don't use DVDs anymore. We're streaming everything now. And so ADS-B would be the equivalent of streaming versus this technology that we just shut down. I would equate that to the VHS tape. It's not even to the DVD level as far as some of the technology we have. So those two systems are gone. How did you even know if it was available? Now we're going back to doing a biannual flight review here, looking at the sectional charts. How did you know a VOR had TWEB information on it? There's a T inside of the dark circle at the upper right-hand corner of the information block. There was also several NDB stations around the state, non-directional beacons, that had that same T in the upper corner of that block. What we also discovered during that time is that a lot of those NDBs they weren't broadcasting. They've been off the air for a long time. And so that information wasn't even available because that radio transmitter has been off the air. Off the air for several reasons. One of them is maintenance issues, lack of parts, scheduling to get technicians out to fix them. So there's several issues that play into that as well. So NDBs are going to be going away. So I'll probably be talking to you about that at some point in time, and curious to know how that would impact your flying around the state of Alaska. NDBs are old technology. We've got GPS now, and it's very expensive to maintain those NDB radios, very expensive to operate them. They use a lot of electricity. And in a lot of these villages, it's getting more and more difficult to pay the fuel bill to be able to run the generators to keep those radios on the air. We have a problem though. We're putting all of our navigational eggs in one basket when it comes to GPS now. So that discussion is happening within the FAA. What do we do? How do we add resiliency to that system? So a lot of things going on in government advocacy that I'm dealing with. So it's good to see a lot of you coming in on social media here. A lot of folks on Instagram waving and saying hello. Folks there on Facebook. It's good to see you, John, as you're checking in, and other folks as well. So one other thing I wanted to briefly mention is that although we shut 2 systems down on January 1, there was another program that was fully implemented January 2nd, technically, because the way the rule was written, it was after January 1 that ADSB was now mandated. And just a reminder, I've had several people call me this week. ADSB out is mandated inside or above the Anchorage Class C airspace and above 18,000 feet here in Alaska. The transponder, our newspaper, actually went to the printer this afternoon. And so I wrote an article in the transponder that will be going out in your mailbox and any day now, talking about those requirements. I mentioned a tool to get a waiver to be able to fly inside the rural airspace. And at the time that information needed to be submitted for my article, the FAA was not sure if that system was going to be up and running, but it is. They were able to meet the deadline and they got that system up and running. There's you can just search in Google or any other search engine, ADSB waiver. ADAPT is the name of the program, and it's an acronym. And I'll admit to you, this time of the night, trying to remember what that acronym stands for, I can't pull it out of the top of my head. So ADAPT and ADSB, if you just do a search for that, you'll find that. But I will tell you, the FAA is not going to be very generous with granting waivers. They've come out and said that they're just not going to do it, especially if you're a commercial operator. You may have read in the news that the Bahamian airline, not sure I'm pronouncing that right, but anyway, the national airline of the Bahamas has been denied access into the U.S. airspace in all but one of their aircraft because they did not equip with ADSB. FAA was serious about that mandate, serious about the timeline, serious about the deadline, and they're sticking to it. So if you got any questions about that, about TIBS or TWEB or anything else, there's a lot of things going on here with the Airmen's. Please feel free to write a comment, send me an email, go to our website, alaskaairmen.org, and my contact information is there. While you're on the website, look at the online store. We've got all of our merchandise up there, some logo wear and hats and other things. A good place to go look and see what's available. Encourage you to get your raffle tickets because they're selling quick. And the trade show is in May, the Great Alaska Aviation Gathering. We were talking this afternoon as a staff that the clock is ticking, and it's not that far off. So buy your raffle ticket. We're raffling off a Cessna 180. A lot of folks have asked for a larger airplane than a Super Cub, and so this year we're giving away a Cessna 180. So make sure you buy your tickets, get them fast, get them early. I think the phrase is vote early, vote often, something like that. Buy your tickets early, buy them often. So buy more than one. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. Been running for about 15 minutes now. It's nice to interact with you. We're going to continue to do these events. I'm going to do an advocacy update once a month. There'll be other folks with the Airmen's giving updates on their operations and their programs that they're running, whether it's scholarships or the next gen initiatives that we've got running here for the Airmen's Association and other things from time to time. So it's good to see folks. Again, if you got questions or comments, feel free to leave them here at either Instagram or Facebook, or send me an email and we'll be glad to talk with you. Good night, everybody.